Welcome to the Leadership with Biana Kovic Show, and thank you for being with us. Our topic, leadership, focuses on leaders such as yourselves. We believe that leadership is a skill that can be learned through practice and awareness. It is our hope that our conversation will help you become more reflective when it comes to your own leadership practices and enable you to leave a positive legacy. Our very special guest is Julie Erickson. Julie is a career and executive coach who helps people and organizations find and do their right fit work. Since 2007, through her company Mission Advancement Consulting and her blog myrightfitjob.com, she has helped hundreds of people effectively market themselves, make fulfilling work and career transitions, become leaders, and navigate challenging work situations. For nonprofits and small businesses, Julie facilitates strategic planning, team building, leadership development, and strategic marketing. Before starting her business, Julie was a nonprofit CEO in New York City for 12 years. She started her career in fundraising and direct marketing and has raised over $100 million for nonprofits dedicated to ending poverty and increasing socioeconomic and racial inequality. A graduate of Smith College, Julie also has an MBA in leadership. She's a director emeritus for Feeding America and volunteers with several nonprofits in her northern New Jersey community. Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Biana. I'm really excited to be here.
Julie, you are the principal of My Right Fit Job. Can you tell us more about your company?
I started My Right Fit Job about 12 years ago after I had ended my nonprofit career in New York and had been searching around myself for what would I do. And it turned out I was involved in a local group. We started of job seekers, and we started a Monday morning get-going group. And I realized that I was coaching a lot of people through the job search process. So that was the origin of My Right Fit Job, that I could help people find what I call your right fit job, something that makes use of your talents. So you're doing work that you enjoy doing, that you are having the kind of impact that you want to have, that you're working in an environment that is resonant with your values and your working style. And what I call that is your core value proposition. And I call it that because when you're happy at work, when you're in a right fit job, you're going to deliver great value to any employer. So I've been doing that, and I've slowly added on executive coaching. People who get jobs say, oh, I don't want to leave you. I want more help. So I help them, and I do a lot of leadership development in those coaching engagements.
So you basically do business coaching and executive coaching and coaching how to get the job, correct?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. One of the things that is interesting, you said business coaching, because I do work with businesses, and some of my clients start their own small businesses. So that's been another fun line of work.
Going back to job search, some of us might be jumping into the opportunities that might not be aligned with our core values. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on that?
So if your values are not aligned with an organization, you're not going to be a good culture fit. And a lot of clients come to me because they're working in a place that really doesn't reflect their values. And more companies are also looking for culture fit. So they're trying to find people who have similar values and work styles to how they actually operate. So what I do with my clients is ask them a lot of questions, including about their values, so that they can get clear on what is very important to them. Mm-hmm. And then we develop a must-have list. And those are 6 different aspects of a workplace that you must have in order to do your best work. Now, you're not necessarily going to get all of the things that you want, but culture and colleagues is one of the categories. And having a must-have list equips a job seeker to actually interview the employer. Mm-hmm. So you're not coming from desperation. You're actually coming from, I really want to find the right fit, and you want to find the right fit. So let's discuss these important areas.
You mentioned that it is very important to interview an employer, and I'm just curious to know, how do you go about it? Are there a set of questions that you want to ask prior to committing to several rounds of interviews or joining the organization?
Every round, Biana, of interviews is going to reveal more and more information. So I encourage my clients, if they get an interview, that they go on that interview, that they keep a record of the responses. You can take notes in an interview.
Mhm.
And you can definitely ask questions and should ask questions. One of the simplest ones is, what's the culture like here? You can actually ask that. Another question would be, how will my role contribute to the company achieving its goals?
Mhm.
And that sends a message that you are interested in impact, and will you actually be in a meaningful role if that's important to you.
Hmm. So during the interview, we all want to look good. And I've been in positions where an employer is painting a rosy picture, and then you get a job and it turns a complete opposite. So, my question is, are there signs that we can look for that might give us a clue that what an employee is saying might not be the case?
There are a couple of things. One is to look at a site like glassdoor.com,
Hmm.
where employees, often disgruntled and unhappy, post reviews. So you have to take those with a grain of salt, because perhaps that's someone who had a bad culture fit or had a boss with whom they just could not work. But you'll get some clues there. The other thing is, if you look on your LinkedIn in your network, maybe you'll find someone who is a second degree connection, even a first degree connection, who works at the company or did work at the company. And if you can connect with them and say, I applied for this job, I'm going for an interview, I'd love to hear more about your experience there. That's a great way of getting a read on what the company is really like. That's actually also a reason that I recommend, if you can, if you're invited to multiple interviews, go to multiple interviews.
Hmm.
I remember one job that I was applying for years ago, to the director of development or fundraising for a nonprofit whose mission I really believed in. And the first interview with the CEO went really well, and I was very excited about potentially taking the job. We had a second interview, and it was like he had had a personality transformation.
Hmm.
He was insulting, condescending. He yelled at me. I was like, whoa, no. It turned out later that he actually had bipolar disorder. So it was very unfortunate that he had that, but it saved me from taking a job, which would have been a nightmare.
So, what you saying to us, never ever reject an interview?
Exactly. That would be my advice, unless you know that there's a non-negotiable that really, for instance, you've thought about it, talked about it with your loved ones and friends, and no, I'm not moving to Houston, for example, then it makes sense to withdraw. But otherwise, it doesn't. I just had a client who thought she had a non-negotiable about the length of her commute. She lives in New Jersey. The job was in Westchester County, New York, which is a good hour and a half commute. But she is being offered the job, and she's going to take it because of the interview process. She really, really liked the people so much. It's exactly what she wants to do. And in conversations with her family around it, they were like, well, we could move. And she was like, wow, okay. I didn't even think about that. So you never know.
So, what you're saying to us, non-negotiables could change.
Exactly. Through discussion. Exactly.
So, one of your expertise is developing a good, solid resume. Are there any particular things that one needs to have that resume really catch the eye of the HR person?
The first rule, I would say, of resumes is make it about your impact. Not about your activities. If you say that you managed a team of 6 people, I ask the question, so what happened? So use the so what test on any item in your resume. If you list an activity like manage 6 people, I'd rather you say, forged and led high performing team of 6 people to do X, Y, and Z. Because the reason for this is employers, even if their job descriptions don't ask for impact, they want you to have an impact on the bottom line in some way, whether that's actual dollars or a program or a service or a product, whatever it is. You need to be able to contribute to the bottom line. And the only way they know that you can contribute to the bottom line is through your resume. So I say employers only care about your past as it will help them achieve their goals. So the resume is a very important place to outline the kind of impact you've had. It could be numbers, measurable. It could be directional, increased, reduced, improved. It could be a leadership thing, initiated something. And there's a range of things that you can do.
And what would be a perfect length for the resume?
The rule of thumb that I use is 2 pages. And for people who work in certain industries, you can have longer or you have to have shorter. For example, in the financial services industry, 1 page. If you can't get it on 1 page, they don't want to read it. A recruiter may actually want to see a 2-page resume with more detail, and often they submit a bigger write-up, but you have to have a 1-page resume. Whereas in academia or in any kind of, say, a think tank or a philanthropic foundation, you can have a longer one because often they're looking for someone who has credibility, which comes from publishing, speaking at conferences, being interviewed by the media. There's a whole range of things that just will not fit on 2 pages. But you should be able to fit your experience and your education at very least on 2 pages. Also, people who are very new in the workforce, recent graduates, 1 page is preferred. However, there are exceptions. If you have a lot of volunteer experience, a lot of internships, you may need to go to 2 pages, but never more than that if you're very young.
So some of us are going through a period of reinvention where you're working in one industry and you want to transition to another. How does one capture the knowledge from the previous work to successfully transition to a field that he or she has never worked before?
Let me just answer very directly that the best way to make a transition into another industry is to focus on what we call transferable skills. And those are skills that you have that will equip you to work across industries because they're pretty common. Team leadership. Did you build and lead a team? That is transferable. Production. I have a client right now who is a TV commercial producer, and she wants to get into a different line of work. Well, the skills involved in being a producer are very similar to the skills involved in being a project manager, which are really very similar to the skills involved in being a chief operating officer in some cases in smaller companies. So a resource that actually is really useful is at the U.S. Department of Labor. They have a section where it's the Bureau of Labor Statistics, I think. I'm not exactly sure, but they have a listing of all kinds of jobs across all industries, and they summarize what the basic skills are for each of those jobs. So you can find transferable skills. You can find jobs you might want to have and find out what skills you would need. The second answer is you got to network. The best way to get into a new field, once you've identified what your transferable skills are and have put down what your impact has been in your previous jobs, you have to network with people in the new field. Find out from them what's required. Refine your resume based on that. Start reading things. Take a class. Going back to school to change careers is probably one of the most effective strategies because you're demonstrating real commitment. Maybe volunteer, maybe do some free consulting, build up some experience in this new field, get an internship. I know it sounds silly, someone in their 40s or 50s getting an internship, but you can. I have clients who've done it.
So in your opinion, out of curiosity, how long would it take for someone to successfully transition from one career to the next?
It can take from 1 to 3 years. There's a really excellent book by a woman named Herminia Ibarra called Working Identities. And in it, she's interviewed a lot of people who have changed careers. And she talks about the process that they went through. Really helpful book. And what she saw was 1 to 3 years. My clients, 1 to 3 years. It takes time because you have to build up some knowledge days, even if you're not going to school, you need to do informational interviews with people, right? Or like people listening to your broadcast. I mean, I think that they would learn a lot about particular fields or skills that they might need. There's a lot of blogging out there. So there's some research involved in doing a career switch.
So I'd like to talk a little bit more about social media because I know that that's another of your expertise. Can you tell us a little bit more of the impact that social media has on job search?
I'd love to talk about social media. I think it's so important. I mean, you and I connected through LinkedIn, which is social media. And I think it's the most important thing that anybody can do is to have a great LinkedIn profile and a great LinkedIn presence. It's a place where you can establish yourself as an expert by passing on information. You can write a little blog post or you can post an article, make a comment. You also, I think with LinkedIn, you can learn from other people. You can meet other people. And there's a lot of people now reaching out for clients and making sales pitches, which gets a little annoying, but it's fine because maybe I do want those services. I don't know. But for me, it's the core social media platform that anybody should have. And by the way, get some recommendations. Give some recommendations. That's not the endorsements. Those are actually when people like something. I mean, I've seen you have recommendations. I have recommendations, and I've given them. So giving them also shows you're a generous person, if that's important to you. I'm on Twitter. Twitter is not for everybody, you know. I think that Twitter, if you are in communications, you should have a Twitter account. Well, you should really have an Instagram account now. That's the big hot one. And I think that Facebook, if you have a business, having a Facebook page is really important because I get most of my clients by recommendation, referral. And I think that's how a lot of businesses do it. And if you don't have a LinkedIn page or Facebook page, people don't really necessarily trust that you're real. So it's just smart advertising. Did I answer that question?
Absolutely, yeah. And I was just curious to learn, are there any do's or don'ts that one needs to be aware of when it comes to social media or doing an outreach like I did to you? You know, is there anything that you don't want to say or you want to say to get further ahead?
Yeah, I guess I always recommend if you want to connect with somebody on LinkedIn, for instance, don't send a blank invitation if you have the chance to actually write a note that says why you want to connect. That is going to be so much more successful. And I think the other thing is always be polite. I've said to some people who've written to me saying, would you like to connect? And I'm like, I don't really have the time. And someone said, oh, well, gee, thanks so much for that really nasty reply. I was like, oh, well, I am never going to connect with you again. LinkedIn is for business. It's not for politics. It's not for dating. Please respect that. It's unbelievable what some people post and makes you look unprofessional. You may have very strong political beliefs. Facebook and Twitter, that's what those are for.
So what you're saying to us, we have to work within the content and context of the media.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And you have to be comfortable that if you're a job seeker or someone seeking clients, that you're okay with losing clients or not getting a job because of your social media presence. If you're okay that you risk losing a potential job because you've posted racy photographs of yourself or you've come down really hard on someone politically, that's fine. But know that that's going to happen. Employers especially are checking your social media. They want to know how you show up outside of the company because the chances are that someone else would find that and not want to do business with the company, for example. So your actions have a lot of consequences on social media.
So I'd like to segue to another of your expertise, which is coalition building and strategic planning, which you do with a Healthy Orange Coalition. Can you tell us a little bit more about that part of your work?
That's a lot of fun. When I was working in the nonprofit sector and for New York City government, my focus was on helping to end poverty. And as a coach, I'm helping end individual poverty by helping people get a job. The purpose that I have in my life wasn't really being fulfilled. And so I had these wonderful chances to work with some community-based organizations in Orange, New Jersey, which is a very low-income, high-need community. And the Healthy Orange Coalition was formed in response to and with funding from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Healthy Communities Initiative. They said, let's form coalitions that are going to foster health, longer life, and better quality of life in these poor communities. Mm-hmm. We know it's going to take a while, so the funding was 4 years. And we know it's going to take you some help to do the coalition building and to do the work involved. So we want you to have a community coach. And I was overjoyed to be selected as the community coach. Mm-hmm. My role has been to train the group, keep the group on focus in using coalition building skills. When you build a coalition, you're inviting groups that have their own purposes and their own interests. And what we found is that they would a lot of them would coalesce around this idea of a healthy orange. How can we create this healthy community? And what we've done is we've encouraged groups to keep doing what they're doing, but let's share information. Let's see if we can partner. What kind of collaborations can we have? What kind of additional skills do we need? What kind of training might we need? And so my role as the coach is to encourage all of that.
And what are the results from your work with the coalitions? Any positive results that came out of it?
Yeah, some great results. We've had involvement by more than 40 different groups. Mm-hmm. So it started with a core of 5 groups, and now it's expanded that much. We have a website with a lot of information on it. We have had activities involving children. There's the Teen Summit, where teenagers are taught a whole lot about leadership and self-empowerment and how can they be leaders. We've had young people start to run for public office in Orange, really see their civic involvement. They realize that if they have control of the city's resources or a say in how those resources are put out, then they can have an impact on creating a healthier Orange. And there's been a lot of work with artists and starting to change the image of Orange as a place that people want to get away from, starting to find what are the assets in the town. So now there's a Music City initiative, and there are concerts going on and classes going on and a festival that happens. Yeah, there's been a lot of great success in terms of people saying, wow, nobody's ever done this. Nobody's ever brought us all together. It's so cool just to even know what's going on. And and then we find out about collaborations that have happened, which is exactly what we want.
In addition to working with Healthy Orange Coalition, you're also emeritus board member of Feeding America. Can you tell us a little bit more about that organization and your work with them?
Feeding America is a wonderful anti-hunger organization. It's a national network of food banks and food rescue programs. All through the United States. And those are the programs that deliver food to food pantries, to soup kitchens, to homeless shelters, to halfway houses, to a lot of different places where people go because they simply do not have enough food to eat. And for 11 years, I was the executive director of City Harvest, an anti-hunger food rescue organization in New York. And it was through my role as that CEO that I got onto the board of Feeding America initially. And so they're very smart about keeping people close to them because I make my donations and I get other people to make donations to Feeding America. But I really believe in the work. No one in America should be hungry. And so I'm really proud to be associated with Feeding America.
And obviously the organization is helping many, many families to get a good meal.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, $1 given to Feeding America helps provide 6 meals. So what's important about the work that Feeding America does is all of its members are rescuing, gathering up food that otherwise would be thrown away. So we're saving food and things from the landfill, but all of that, then there's food that's wasted in the fields, in the factory, a lot of different ways. And so the transportation of that is really largely the business of Feeding America and its affiliates. So we don't pay for the food, but we need to get it from where it is to where it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why $1 will buy 6 meals.
So if any of our listeners would like to get involved, how would they go about it?
Go to feedingamerica.org and you can look up, if you want to give to Feeding America itself, that money will be put to excellent use because they do a lot of work on a national level with manufacturers and with growers and with food distributors to arrange for food to be available to local food banks. You can also look up your food bank or the food rescue program in your community and give directly to them.
And you can volunteer, right, at the soup kitchens, correct?
You can absolutely volunteer, not just at a soup kitchen. You can totally volunteer at soup kitchens and food pantries. You can also volunteer at the food bank. My niece and her Girl Scout troop have gone for several years to volunteer because a lot of the manufactured product, for instance, like elbow macaroni, comes in a bulk box and it needs to be packaged into smaller containers that can then be delivered to a food pantry where someone can just pick it off a shelf, rather than them having to repackage it. So there's a lot of great stuff you can do at food banks.
So, this show is about leadership, and you and I spoke a little bit more about it. And as a leader who have coached many, many leaders and helped many leaders become successful, I was wondering, are there any traits that leader needs to have to be a truly successful leader?
That is such a great question and such a challenging one to ask because of the many different aspects of leadership. First definition of a leader is having followers. So I think that the most important element of a leader is to find out what your followers want and need. Then a leader needs to be able to take that information and either by themselves or in leading the team, come up with a vision. Okay, these are your problems. What do we want it to look like in the future? What's our desired future state? Strategic planning is. And a leader needs to inspire people to believe that they, working together, can achieve that goal. To me, those two things are the most important aspects of being a leader. Mm-hmm. A lot of leadership, to me, I used to say my job is to make sure that my team has the resources and support that they need to do their jobs. And I think that concept that is increasingly known as servant leadership, that I'm a leader who empowers my team, who empowers my followers to achieve what they want to achieve separately or as a group. So I need to be listening all the time. Leadership is not about imposing your will. That's bad leadership. I mean, that happens all the time. So I'm really talking about good leadership. So good leadership is about listening and supporting and empowering and inspiring people.
I'm really glad that you're talking about listening skills because, as you mentioned, a lot of leaders like to talk a lot but not listen so well. So my question is, how does one take all that listening and create a direction that even the folks that did not share same opinion will follow?
The main thing about listening is listening. What I do is I listen for, there's content. Mm-hmm. There's also emotion, and people's tone of voice tells you a lot. The key aspect of listening well is actually asking good questions. So somebody might say something, and then I will ask a follow-up question, because inspiring people means appealing to their emotional state. So I want to find out what's going on, what's really behind this thing you're complaining about. Is it that you're frustrated? Okay, so what's frustrating you? Oh, this person doesn't do something on time. Mm-hmm. Well, what happened when you've talked to them about it? And I ask that kind of question because I want to presume that someone has been proactive. And then they can say, well, I actually haven't talked to that person about it. So, all right. So then we'll have a conversation about, well, how can you talk to that person? So that's leadership at a lower level. Mm-hmm. Listening to a large group of people, I would do listening tours. I would go and talk to a lot of food donors or a lot of financial donors or a lot of the people at the soup kitchens and the food pantries, and keeping note and then bringing that information back and having a discussion with the team, we could come up with a written vision. We could come up with a statement of need. We could identify the core problems. I mean, that's what strategic planning is really about.
Mm-hmm.
About we're here, where do we want to be? How are we going to get there? And I think that when you have a vision that a number of people have contributed to, they're bought into it. They like that vision. And the leader's job is to remind them always of the purpose. Why are we here?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we doing this vision? Why does it matter? And that gets at that emotional side that I was talking about. Because especially people who work in nonprofits want to make a difference, want to have an impact. So if I'm saying Feeding America is about ending hunger in America, because nobody should be hungry in one of the richest countries in the world. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
How can that be? And you think, yeah, how can that be? Right. Okay. These people have a solution. Awesome. I'm going to support them.
So we both come from non-for-profit industry. And my next question is, how do you sustain that belief among your staff that what they do makes a difference?
One is to make sure that the strategic goals that you have are cascaded down into people's job descriptions, and then that there are regular reports on how did we do in terms of meeting the overall goal. Because what's important is for people to be able to connect their work to the impact that the organization has. And that's best done through job descriptions and regular feedback about how the organization as a whole is doing. And then in meetings that you would have with individual staff, you'd say, hey, you contributed this to that goal. Mm-hmm. That helps people not feel burnt out because they're actually getting acknowledgement and appreciation for what they've done. There's too little of that. That actually is a big job of a leader, to acknowledge and appreciate staff. I had a saying up on my bulletin board, catch someone doing something right, because people really respond to praise. I think another thing is to regularly communicate with people some of the stories of the people who are the recipients of the organization's services, because that reminds them, why are we doing this? Mm-hmm. You know, people need to feel successful, but they also need to understand the concrete impact, why this matters. So we would always have interviews with clients in a newsletter that we did, or we would have presentations by some of our drivers who came in regular contact with people who were getting services. Some of their family members, aunts or cousins might be using soup kitchens or food pantries, or we would get a report from our agency relations people. So that's the kind of stuff that helps people feel connected. Energized. Mm-hmm. Yeah, connected.
So what you're saying to us, share stories and experiences so that you can sustain your employees in their beliefs and efforts.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So this leads me to my next question, because you mentioned praise. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on generosity and leadership?
Oh, Biana, the best leaders are generous. They're generous with their time. They're generous with their praise. They're generous with their sort of inclusivity. You know, everybody matters. Every single job has to be done. You matter no matter who you are or what level you're at. And I think it's the generosity of mind that really characterizes the best leaders, because generosity often is twinned with kindness, caring about how people feel, and paying attention to make sure that everybody gets attention, everybody gets included. I mean, that's a lot for a leader to do. It really is. It's a hard job. And the most effective leaders get a lot of pleasure from seeing the results of that, from having a really high-performing, motivated workforce.
And what are your thoughts on clarity and curiosity, and how does that impact leadership and one's leadership style?
I believe that the best leaders are always learning, always want to know more. Curiosity. They're curious about themselves, self-knowledge. I mean, you can't be a good leader unless you can actually lead yourself. So you need to know about yourself and your goals and what you want to accomplish and how do you get there. I think that you need to be curious about the people who are following you. Who are they? What are their needs? What are their interests? Not that you're going to be able to meet all of those needs and interests, but that's going to inform what you do and how you lead them. I think you want to be curious also about the field that you're in, and you want to be curious about the environment that you work in. So constant learning about everybody and everything. And clarity, I think, is such an essential part of leadership in the sense that if you can boil down into a short, clear statement, what are we all doing this for? Why are we all doing this? That clarity and the brevity of it gives people something to coalesce around. So clarity is, for me, also linked to transparency. Mm-hmm. I'm a big believer in sharing as much information as possible with staff and with the team, because when people know what's going on and why a decision was made, and they're clear about why the decision was made, there's a clear explanation, they'll go along with it often. Or they might raise something that maybe hadn't been considered and therefore improve the decision. So being curious about how the decision is received is also a really important thing, because leaders are always having to make decisions based on usually imperfect and incomplete information, because that's what the job requires. You do your best, but you have to act, because otherwise, if you're just sitting in the station, nobody's going to follow you. You're not going anywhere. You have to act. And telling people why you did that, I think, and helping them get clear in their minds about why, even if they disagree, if they understand, then you've done a really good job as a leader.
So I really like that you talked about the importance of sharing information with your staff. And I was wondering, is there an instance where the information shouldn't be shared?
Well, I wouldn't share other people's salary information. I wouldn't share confidential discussions with the board that the board did not want me to share. I respect other people's confidences. I might not share things that are just in the very beginning stages, unless I felt that it was important for people to have input into it. And I think that there mostly are most everything that happens at a company can benefit from other people's input into it. So I always bent more toward telling people what exactly was going on. I remember my CFO did not initially want to share financial information with the whole staff. I was like, yeah, but that's so important. I mean, that governs how we're doing. Now, am I going to worry them? I don't not want to unnecessarily worry them, but if I can paint the picture so that they are sort of prepared for what's coming, either good news or bad news, I think that is respecting them.
That's a very good point, because I know a lot of CFOs and CEOs who do not share information because they're afraid that information might be manipulated in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
So do you believe that every leader is also a good manager?
No, I don't. They're two really different things. Leaders are the ones who inspire and all of that. I mean, I think that most really well-respected leaders are people who will roll up their sleeves and do the work and do manage projects and people and things like that. But management is about how are we actually going to do this work. And I know great leaders who are terrible project managers. So they hire somebody to help them do that. They hire a COO. It's nonprofit. The executive director really needs to be out there and raising money and inspiring people and all of that. They can rely on people who are better managers in terms of actually getting the work done. Some leaders are both, but it's not necessary.
So what you're saying to us, it is not necessary to be a good manager to be considered an exceptional leader.
To be an exceptional leader, they probably are a good manager. But the most exceptional leaders recognize their strengths and their weaknesses and delegate and let people who have complementary strengths do their job. I mean, I've known in my coaching career, I've known so many clients of mine who complain about the leader of their organization being a terrible manager and yet not being willing to let go and let someone else be the manager, because things get confused, things don't get done, there's no follow-up, there's no feedback, there's micromanaging, telling you how to do your job, communicates lack of trust in people. And so then those people lose respect as leaders also. And that's a terrible thing to have happen.
You actually made a really good point, which actually leads me to my next question about creating a balance within your own leadership style. What are your thoughts on how does one recognize what are his weaknesses or her weaknesses and strengths, and then create a balance to bring other people in and allow other people to contribute?
I recommend people get an executive coach and be honest with that coach. Do some personality assessments. If you're brave enough, do a 360 assessment. Find out what people think about you and be ready to hear some harsh comments and not to retaliate against those people. But if you're going to do a 360, I highly recommend doing it with a coach. Do not do it by yourself, because leaders have power, and people with power tend to get egos and tend to get invested in seeing themselves a certain way. I certainly was like that. And not all the time, but I remember I did a 360. And if it hadn't been for my coach, I would never have been able to take what I perceived as negative comments. I wouldn't have been able to take them and use them to then improve on an area that was definitely lacking. Sometimes I conveyed impatience too much. Okay, I was a little defensive about that. Don't you know I've got a lot that I have to get done? But my coach helped me see, yes, and you are the person who they're looking to be strong and to allow them to make a mistake or go through their process or whatever. So developing more patience is definitely a good leadership thing for you to do, Julie. So being open to feedback that you don't necessarily want and using that information, then I think is a really good thing for a leader to be able to find what they're good at and what they're not good at.
So what you're saying to us, you need someone who's going to do those check and balances for you and also create a space for you to improve, right?
I think you're very right. I mean, needing to create a safe space for yourself. And I think that can happen with coaching. So many executives are using coaching now because the coach is your ally, is your cheerleader, is someone who's on your side and can help you interpret things. What I've learned is that the things that make me most defensive are actually the areas where I have the most growth to do. I'm defensive because I'm literally defending this area of weakness that I don't feel able on an unconscious level to handle. So a safe space to talk about, I'm having this defensive reaction. How could they say that? To vent your feelings and then get to a place of, okay, how can I work with this information? I think you are so right that that's very, very important.
Any thoughts on diversity in the workplace?
I think diversity is essential if any team or group or company is going to do really great work. You need people from diverse backgrounds because they bring different perspectives based on their life experience. And, obviously we need men and women and LGBTQ people, transgender, African American, Latino, but within that, Dominican or Puerto Rican or Mexican or Argentinian, or people come from different cultures, and within the different cultures, values are rated differently or they're experienced differently. People have different bases of knowledge, expertise based on the backgrounds that they come from. So I want all of that. I want the best of everybody's thinking and their backgrounds. And if that means that we need to do some work around how do we be inclusive, how do we ensure that we are getting diversity by looking at our hiring practices or who listens to who in a meeting, are we sensitive to the fact that men are dominating? How do we change that? I think that that's going to get us, if we do that work, we're going to get a lot better results from our teamwork. The other kind of diversity is in personality and work style. So we did a lot of work with Myers-Briggs assessment and finding out personality types. And it was very useful to be finding out how people approached work and how they thought about it, what their strengths were. There's also Gallup Strengths Finder, where you can find out your top 5 strengths. And you can create a leader, can create a team purposely to have people with different types and strengths so that you're making sure that there is no one area that you're not going to be getting a perspective from. You want to be able to hear a lot of different opinions, not just people who think the way I think.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm only going to get one kind of solution. And I have found that diversity yields excellent solutions 100% of the time.
I'm really happy that you talk about, because sometimes people are staying away from what's not familiar. But what you're saying to us is actually, if you bring in everyone who is different than you are, then you get a better result, right?
I do. I totally agree with that. And let's just think about Uber, right?
Mm-hmm.
The bro mentality that Uber was known for and still is known for, according to Uber drivers I talked to, that's because the founder hired people just like him and nobody challenged that attitude. And that company, while it's still doing okay, its reputation really suffered because it was exclusive. It was not inclusive. It was homogeneous. It was not diverse. And it became a very toxic culture, particularly for women.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want that if we're
Right.
leaders.
So it's very interesting that you mentioned you want to be challenged, because some leaders do not want to be challenged. They look at it being challenged as someone is being disrespectful to them. But you're saying to us being challenged is actually good for the company.
The worst thing that can happen to a leader is to have people around who only say, oh, what a great idea. Yes, you should do what you think.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my God. That is so bad for the ego. And that makes a very egocentric and power mad person, I think. But it also is really terrible for a company. Who thinks that they are the only one with the answers? Wow, that's a megalomaniac. That's just not good. You'll end up finding that not everybody, your customers are not like you. So how can you even think that you were the one who has all the answers? Yeah, you need to have people who say, well, wait a minute, that's not actually what we've heard from the customer base. And you need to have an open mind and be able to listen to other opinions, because you'll learn something.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I said the best leaders are the ones who are always learning, always curious.
And how does being assertive helps you lead better?
Assertive is a really interesting word. I think it's a great word. When women are assertive, we are often thought of as the B word. Asserting is based in confidence. When I can assert a point of view or assert myself into a situation, it means I'm confident that I have something to add of value that will help create a solution, that will resolve a problem, that will result in some kind of innovation, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of women and young people sometimes are reluctant to assert themselves because they're not sure that they really have anything to offer. And a lot of that, I think sometimes it stems from inexperience, but sometimes it stems from a lack of self-confidence. Have you heard of something called the imposter syndrome?
Mm-hmm.
Where people say, oh my God, they're going to find out I don't really know what I'm talking about.
I don't belong. Mm-hmm.
Right. But honestly, practically everybody feels that way. The only ones who don't that I have found are some men. But most women, gay people, people of color feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, if everybody feels that way, then nobody would say anything. Okay, we have to assert ourselves. We have to get in there. We have to put our point of view across, even if someone doesn't like it and tries to shut us down. It's about, I've done the homework. I've done the work. I know what I'm doing. And I'm going to go ahead and say what I think needs to be said. It hasn't been said. It's a new thing. All right, I might have a little fear. It's all right. Put my arm around that fear and say, we're just going ahead and doing it anyway, And I think 9 times out of 10, you'd be surprised at how welcome the input is.
Mm-hmm. So don't be afraid to speak up.
Yeah, go for it. Speak up.
So I like to segue a little bit and focus on work with media and how does possible negative review can impact leaders' leadership style. What are your thoughts on that?
So there are leaders who get defensive and fly off the handle and deny, deny. There are other leaders who would actually go to somebody who specializes in dealing with the media to come up with a response. I believe transparency is the best thing that you can do. Yeah, we were wrong, and this is how we're fixing it. So I'd go to the crisis communications folks for help on that.
Mm-hmm.
And smart leaders will do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you're talking to the media and you've initiated it, it's important to know what you want to say and to stay on message, not let your emotions get the better of you.
Mm-hmm.
So rehearse, and stay on message and have your communications person next to you.
And be
Don't
clear
do it
with your
alone.
message, right?
Clear messaging. Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And stay on topic.
Mm-hmm. So, how do you evaluate your own success?
The most important thing is that I really love what I do. I'm very, very happy.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's success. And I do doing work that is consonant with my values, and I'm doing it in a way that's consonant with my values. I was not often, but sometimes told, "You're too nice," or "God, you can't be so kind." And I disagree wholeheartedly with that. I think that leaders can be nice and can be kind and can be decisive and all of that. So now I get to be nice and kind to my heart's content while also delivering clear, direct messages to my clients for their own benefit. I do it in a nice way,
Mm-hmm.
So that's my success. And I get all my clients through referral. That's real success.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah. And obviously, you are a coach. So I was wondering when you started in your career, have you had a coach or a role model that guided you along the way?
I absolutely had a coach. I was one of the early adopters of coaching.
Mm.
When I first became the executive director of City Harvest, I was fortunate enough to meet a woman who later became my coach. And I have had a coach now since 2005. So I would never be successful. I have two coaches right now. I would never be successful without my coaches.
And what suggestions do you have for women leaders?
There's a lot of suggestions. First of all, read a lot of the books about women and leadership. You may recognize yourself in it, but you know what you're really going to recognize? The environment that you're in. We still are in a culture and a work culture where men dominate. They created the game, the playing field, the way things happen. And so we have to be aware of that. Now, I can make certain choices like any woman can, whether I'm going to go along with that environment, but be prepared for the consequences. And I think that the main thing is be clear on your values and what's important to you and what you want to achieve, and then use whatever tool you need to achieve that. If we want power, we may have to play the game. And then when we're at the top, we can make some different kinds of decisions about hiring or about personnel practices or, the kinds of services that are offered or the tenor of meetings, how people behave at meetings, what's tolerated. But we really need to be aware that a lot of men do not like women leaders.
Even nowadays?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're threatened. I think the younger generation may be different. It remains to be seen because they're still rising and becoming leaders. So that there may be difference. But when I talk to women who are working with bosses in men in their 40s and 50s and 60s, there's a lot of subtle discrimination. That expression, microaggressions. I just heard the other day about someone who says things at meetings and then isn't listened to, and then a man says it and they're like, "Oh, that's great." Mm-hmm. So that kind of stuff's still happening. Mm-hmm. There's some great books that people can read. One is called How Women Rise, and it's about 10 habits that women have that get in our way of being successful. And it's really about how do you, as a woman in a man's world, be successful. So I highly recommend that book.
So what you're saying to us, you have to be aware and you have to constantly learn and understand yourself, right?
Yes.
And what is your
Yep.
mission in life?
My mission is to use my experience to benefit others and help them find their right fit path in the world to be happy.
Mm-hmm. And any final thoughts?
I guess the one thing that I would add is great leaders really do look outside themselves as well as inside themselves. And so many of them are clear about their values and live out their values inside a company and externally. There's a consistency and integrity that they have. I think integrity is a very important word for leaders. We get so disillusioned when we find that someone we've looked up to in their professional life is, doing terrible things in their personal life. The best leaders aren't doing that. And so I find it interesting that you were talking about a lot of the nonprofit work that I've done, because I think that many leaders also are looking to contribute to some kind of social cause. They're looking outside themselves. They're saying, I'm a member of a community. How can I help outside, in terms of making an impact on hunger, for instance, or making an impact on a school, or making an impact on a museum or something like that, that most of the great leaders are doing something to impact the world around them, as well as the companies they work for and the people who work for them.
And how can people get in contact with you or use your services?
The best way to get in touch with me is via email, which is julie@myrightfitjob.com.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for being our guest.
Thank you, Biana. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Leadership with Biana Kovic Show. Remember that you're all leaders in your own rights, and the impact that you're meant to achieve starts with small acts of kindness, curiosity, and generosity. Please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you again, and until next time.